Now, as promised, the news in detail. We begin in the U.S., where the death toll from the new coronavirus has crossed 3,000 as that country struggles to contain the outbreak with more than 164,000 infections. Worldwide, the death toll stands at over 37,800 with more than 780,000 confirmed cases. This report has the details.
As predicted by the UN over a week ago, the US has undoubtedly become the epicenter of the new coronavirus outbreak. In a change of mind, US President Donald Trump has finally pledged to toughen federal social distancing guidelines in April. While Italy and Spain continue to reel from the pandemic, New York is now in a similar peril.
As Governor of New York, I am asking healthcare professionals across the country, if you don't have a healthcare crisis in your community, please come help us in New York now. We need relief.
Mexico has declared a health emergency and issued stricter rules aimed at containing the fast-spreading coronavirus. Mexican officials say timely precautions are necessary for this pandemic.
If we enter into the accelerated phase with many infected, with many cases, the epidemic will not be controlled. Let's be clear, we don't want to go through the scenario that other countries are unfortunately going through, who did not reduce the number of cases at the beginning of the accelerated transmission period. So this is the moment.
The UN has warned that states like Afghanistan and Palestine with extremely limited resources can be hit hard in the coming weeks. Meanwhile, Italy has extended its lockdown until Easter amid the rising death toll. But there is some hope, as for the first time, the country reports a declining infection rate.
Hungary's parliament has granted Nationalist Prime Minister Viktor Orbán the right to rule by decree to fight the coronavirus. Legislators ignored calls by opponents and rights groups to put a time frame on the extra jurisdiction, sparking concerns it can lead to abuse of power. The law indefinitely extends the state of emergency introduced on March 11th. It suspends Parliament and introduces jail terms for up to 5 years for those spreading misinformation. The government rejected accusations by rights groups that the new law could be used to muzzle journalists. Orbán has pledged to surrender the powers later.
The more we slow down the virus spread, the longer the trouble will last, and it will not be 3 months, my dear friends. So I am asking everyone to give me and the government authorization to not only for 3 months. You have entrusted me with this job. We are now under threat. Approve of this law, and after that, you can take these powers back from the government. Power we need to exercise now to tackle the crisis anytime we need. Our intention is to give these back to you.
Well, the UN has called for a $2.5 trillion package for 2/3 of developing countries facing economic damage from the COVID-19 crisis. The UN Conference on Trade and Development said it is time to turn to international solidarity into meaningful action. The UN body said the speed at which economic shockwaves from the pandemic have hit developing countries is worse than the 2008 recession. It called for the cancellation of $1 trillion in debt this year owed by developing countries. The UN body also called for the formation of a $500 billion package to fund a Marshall Plan for health services. The United States has renewed 4 restrictions on Iran's nuclear program for an additional 60 days. U.S. State Department spokesperson Morgan Ortagus said Washington can adjust these restrictions at any time as it monitors Iran's nuclear program. The decision allows Russian, Chinese, and European firms to continue work at Iran's nuclear sites to make it harder for Tehran to develop nuclear weapons. In response, Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif said U.S. sanctions were sabotaging Tehran's fight against the novel coronavirus. Zarif said a combination of curbs and the pandemic had doubled suffering for Iranians. Iran has reported over 41,000 confirmed cases of the coronavirus and more than 2,700 deaths so far. The UN Security Council has expressed concern over the humanitarian situation in Syria amid the COVID-19 outbreak. Council members stressed on the need to four necessary conditions, to tackle the potential impact of the pandemic in Syria. Members were briefed by the UN Special Envoy for Syria, Geir Peterson, via video conference. The Council called on all parties to ensure safe, sustained, and unimpeded humanitarian aid in all parts of the country. It asked stakeholders to guarantee a sustained period of calm throughout the country. Meanwhile, Cyprus has blocked 200 Syrian refugees in the Northern Sea from disembarking. The refugees are the latest victims of border shutdowns due to the spread of the coronavirus. The UN says it is concerned over Israeli settlements and plans to annex Palestinian land. UN Special Coordinator for Middle East Peace Process Nikolai Mladenov says he regrets the lack of progress made on the ground. While briefing the UN Security Council, Mladenov said the expansion of Israeli settlements is a significant obstacle to achieving a viable two-state solution. He said the settlements have no legal validity and are in violation of international law. The envoy called on Tel Aviv to stop the seizure of Palestinian structures in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Mladenov said Israel's unilateral actions pose a threat to the possibility of negotiations between the two sides. Israel has boosted its illegal annexation of Palestinian lands since U.S. President Donald Trump revealed his so-called Middle East peace plan. North Korea has warned it could cut off dialogue with the United States over its ludicrous tone. State media quoted an official as saying that U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's insulting language had given impetus to Pyongyang to make Washington suffer. The unnamed official said North Korea will choose its own way from here onwards. Earlier, Pompeo pressed world powers to continue pressuring North Korea over its nuclear and ballistic missile programs. Pompeo said until there is sufficient progress in bilateral talks, UN Security Council sanctions will not be removed. During the past month, Pyongyang has carried out 4 ballistic and super-large rocket launcher tests. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg have discussed the formation of an inclusive Afghan government. A deadlock between President Ashraf Ghani and self-proclaimed President Abdullah has created a political impasse. In a telephone call, Pompeo and Stoltenberg emphasized on finding a resolution for the ongoing political crisis in the war-torn country. Pompeo and Stoltenberg urged Afghan leadership to end differences for stability and security in the country. Last week, the U.S. announced a $1 billion cut in aid to Afghanistan after failing to break the political deadlock in Kabul. The European Union, though, has welcomed the inclusive negotiation team formed by the Kabul leadership. In a statement, the body said this constitutes an important step towards starting intra-Afghan talks and resolving the political crisis. The Taliban say hidden hands in Kabul are disrupting the peace process and release of their prisoners. In a statement, the group said Afghan troops have tortured prisoners, killing 7 and leaving dozens of others injured. The group said Afghan troops beat prisoners on the same day the Taliban delegation was scheduled to arrive in Bagram. It said photographs of tortured inmates showed the brutality of security officials. The group said on one hand, Kabul is expressing willingness to release prisoners, while on the other hand, such steps are being taken. Here in Pakistan, the number of coronavirus infections has jumped to over 1,800 as 148 new cases have been reported over the last 24 hours. Punjab, Sindh, Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa provinces have declared a lockdown to contain the spread of the virus. The health ministry said 49% of the infections are from Iran, 18% from other countries, and 33% due to local transmission. The ministry has reported 25 deaths so far in the country, with 1 death over the last 24 hours. It said 12 patients are in critical condition, while 58 have recovered. Officials said 414 hospitals with COVID-19 isolation management facilities and more than 6,300 beds, are functional across the country. The curfew in Indian-occupied Kashmir is hampering the fight against coronavirus there. The occupied valley is reeling and has been reeling under a total lockdown for the last 240 days, leading to a humanitarian and medical crisis. Doctors in the valley are unable to access online information and courses about the deadly virus. Speaking to media, doctors said awareness drives about symptoms are impossible to run in the region. Medics say they want to educate people about the pandemic, but cannot due to very slow internet in the valley. Meanwhile, human rights group Internet Freedom Foundation has asked New Delhi to lift the curbs in the valley. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's sudden 21-day-long lockdown has created chaos across the country. The unplanned curfew has led to the exodus of millions of workers who were forced to bear police brutality. Gujarat police fired tear gas on 500 workers, demanding to be allowed to go home to other parts of India because they have no jobs. Police claimed the workers disrupt peace in the area, hence 93 of them were arrested after the protest. In Uttar Pradesh, health workers, sprayed a group of migrants with disinfectant after making them sit on the road. Truck drivers have left their vehicles, meanwhile, loaded with goods on the roads as interstate borders have been locked down. Trade ministers from the group of 20 major economies will convene a second extraordinary video conference today over COVID-19 challenges. In their first meeting yesterday, the ministers discussed ways to overcome supply chain disruptions. In a statement, the economic powers agreed to keep their markets open to ensure the continued flow of medical supplies and essential goods. The trade ministers pledged to take immediate measures to facilitate trade and incentivize production. Meanwhile, the Russian economy minister Maxim Reshetnikov called upon states to reduce their sanctions amid the pandemic. The minister said the present-day global situation has further been complicated by numerous trade conflicts and restrictions. The G20 announced a massive $5 trillion package to help fight the pandemic last week. UK's Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been urged by members of the European Parliament to delay his Brexit deadline amid the coronavirus breakout. The call for the delay comes as EU and UK representatives met to discuss the implementation of the withdrawal agreement over video link. The EU Parliament's largest group of lawmakers said the pandemic puts pressure on chances of securing a trade deal by the planned date. MEP Christoph Hansen, a negotiator on the Parliament's Trade Committee, said extension of the transition period is the only responsible thing to do. He said under extraordinary circumstances, the UK cannot afford to expose itself to the double whammy of the pandemic and the exit from the EU single market. Meanwhile, a British PM spokesperson said there were no plans to extend the transition period, which will end on December 31st this year. I'll be back after this break with plenty more news. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now, about 700 tourists, mostly from Great Britain, have left Peru for their home countries. This was the second round of repatriation flights that the British government organized from Peru. The tourists boarded a flight to London from the Air Force Base in Peru's city of Callao. Earlier in March, the South American country closed its borders and halted international air travel amid the novel coronavirus pandemic. Peru has imposed isolation measures and curfews to stem the spread of the pandemic, bringing the country to a standstill. It has reported 950 confirmed cases of coronavirus and 24 deaths so far. In Libya, the UN-recognized Government of National Accord says 57,000 families have been displaced from Tripoli since last year. The Displaced People's Affairs Minister, Yusuf Jalala, said Khalifa Haftar's offensives have forced people to migrate. Jalala said the number of displaced people is over 342,000. He said some IDPs are living with their relatives in areas away from the fighting, while some have moved abroad. Human Rights Watch has warned that Libya's overcrowded detention centers are extremely vulnerable to the COVID-19 spread. The international watchdog said Libyan officials should release children and low-level offenders amid the pandemic. 19 people have died while extinguishing a huge forest fire in China's southwestern Sichuan province. The local government says victims include 18 firefighters and a forestry guide. Authorities say the fire in the mountainous Lingshan region prefecture is threatening the safety of 700,000 citizens of Xichang City. Local officials say 140 fire engines, 4 helicopters, and over 2,000 rescue workers are fighting the blaze. Officials said that more than 1,200 people have been evacuated. In April last year, 27 firefighters were killed in a huge forest fire in Muli County in the same prefecture. Australia's state of New South Wales has officially marked the closure to its worst ever bushfire season. State Rural Fire Service Commissioner Shane Fitzsimons said the next bushfire season will begin in a matter of months. Fitzsimons said incredible work by rescue workers helped save lives and property. He said rescue organizations will now turn their focus to the novel coronavirus pandemic response. The devastating fire season between September and February killed 33 people and about 1 billion animals. Bushfires destroyed some 2,500 homes while burning down an area the size of South Korea. The think tank Australia Institute said the country's summers are now twice as long as its winters due to climate change. Governments across the world are cracking down on misinformation about the coronavirus pandemic. In the UK, a rapid response unit within the Cabinet Office is working with social media firms to remove fake news and harmful content. The UK Culture Secretary Oliver Dowden says the action was needed to stem the spread of falsehoods and rumors which can cost lives. In Russia, individuals spreading deliberately false information about the coronavirus will face a fine of up to $8,800. Meanwhile, here in Pakistan, the Federal Investigation Agency is tracing those who are spreading fake news through social media and causing panic among the public. Facebook and Twitter have taken similar steps to ban content about coronavirus that can cause harm amid the pandemic. In Lebanon, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees has launched an awareness campaign in migrant camps about preventive measures against COVID-19. State media said UN representatives in Beirut are teaching refugees about methods of prevention, sterilization to avoid COVID-19 infections. Earlier, Lebanese officials say they had placed necessary medical equipment in the vicinity of each camp. Lebanon hosts nearly 1.5 million refugees from Syria and Palestine. The country is undergoing severe economic recession following mass protests against the country's ruling elite. Scientists say a simple blood test can now check for more than 50 types of cancer, often before any signs or symptoms. They said it could help diagnose tumors sooner. Researchers from the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute and Harvard Medical School tested over 4,000 samples from patients with and without cancer. The tests were run for over 50 types of cancer, such as bowel, lung, and ovarian. In 96% of the samples, the tests accurately detected the type of cancer. Lead researcher Professor Geoff Oxnard said this blood test seems to have all the features needed to be used on a population scale as a multi-cancer screening test. He said based upon this successful clinical validation in thousands of patients, the test has actually now been launched for limited use on clinical trials. Thieves in the Netherlands have stolen a painting by Vincent van Gogh from the Singer-Laren Museum in the country. The museum director said the splendid and moving artwork by one of Netherlands' greatest artists has been taken from the community. The painting Spring Garden, which dates back to 1884 and depicts the garden of the rectory of Nuenen, had been on loan from the Groninger Museum. Police are investigating the burglary and are looking for witnesses. The museum is closed due to the coronavirus outbreak, which has claimed 865 lives in the country, with nearly 12,000 confirmed cases. Egypt has lit up its historical Giza pyramids, sending a message in colorful lights that called on people to stay home and stay safe. The Tourism and Antiquities Minister, Khaled El Anani, says the message was written in both Arabic and English, as it was directed to the whole world. Anani said it is a message of solidarity to all countries in which the virus has spread to an advanced stage. The illuminated pyramid also appreciated medical staff and others working to contain the illness.
We have a very important message today, and we are delivering this message before the world's most important artifact, the Great Pyramid. Our message today is twofold. The first part reads, "Stay safe and stay home. Protect the general public's well-being." The second part of the message, which is very important, is the message of thanks, appreciation, and respect to all those who have contributed to caring for the well-being of the general public in Egypt.
U.S. workers at Amazon and food delivery firm Instacart are threatening strikes and have accused the firms of not providing proper protective gear. Meanwhile, the companies claim they are taking extra precautions amid booming demand for delivery services due to the coronavirus outbreak. Pressure is building on Amazon and other delivery firms to improve protection for workers worried about getting infected with coronavirus. U.S. senators have also written to Amazon boss Jeff Bezos expressing their concern. In a statement, Amazon said the firm is going to great lengths to keep buildings extremely clean and help employees practice precautions. It said those who don't want to work are welcome to use paid and unpaid time off options. Time now to find out what the weather is like around the world. And there you have it. You're all caught up. Of course, for the latest updates on these and other stories, you can always follow us on our social media at Indus.news. Thanks for watching.